Hi, Saidullah. It's good to see you.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome to everyone joining us. We're just waiting for everyone to come in, and then we'll get started. Thank you all so much for making the time.
Yes, it's my pleasure. Yes. I think now we can see here 11 participants, including us. So maybe other members are joining us later. So maybe
Yeah,
yes,
I
it's
think
good
so.
to it.
Yeah, we have over 100 people signed up, so I think we're just going to wait a few more minutes for the numbers to go up. How's your internet, Saidullah? Is it okay?
Yes. I know I am here in a place using Wi-Fi. So I think the network is good here, but I'm not sure if the electricity is, gone. But until the electricity is here, I'll be fine with network here today.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, your voice is crystal clear.
Yes, Lucky also joined, I think, right now.
Hi, Lucky. Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you to everyone just joining us. We're going to give it a few more minutes for folks to be able to sign on and join, and then we'll get started. Hi, thank you all so much for joining. We have about 25 people in the room now. The numbers are going up quickly, so we're just gonna wait a few more minutes to get started. Thank you so much. Hi, Rafal. It's very good to see you.
Hello, you too. How are you?
Okay, thank you so much. So we've got 30 people in the room now. We're just waiting for the numbers to go up a little bit more. We have about 125 signed up. So we're just going to give folks a couple of more minutes before we get started.
Sure.
Welcome to everyone joining us. We're just waiting for the numbers to go up a little bit because we're expecting a few more people, and we're going to get started shortly. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're just going to give folks just one more minute and then we're going to kick off. It's good to see so many familiar faces. Thank you so much for making the time. Okay, great. I think I'm going to kick us off now that we have about 45 people in the room. We have about 120 people signed up, so I expect that people will come in while I'm talking. I want to welcome everyone to the Global Alliance Against Digital Hate and Extremism's first event. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. I just want to note that the call will be recorded. Some of our speakers have their webcams off, but do feel free to live tweet. We've cleared this for security purposes. The duration of the event is going to be 1 hour and 15 minutes. Do feel free to participate in the chat, and there will be time for questions in the second light on the urgent need for action against online harms. We're going to be spotlighting global stories from frontline activists who are tackling the impact of disinformation, online hate speech and incitement, and flourishing extremist propaganda in their communities. I want to begin by extending my deepest solidarity to all those who are affected by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think in the past weeks, the world has been forced to contend yet again with a dramatic example of how an information ecosystem can be used to set the scene for horrific violence and loss of life, and indeed to continue justifying it while it happens. And the continued massacres have been absolutely shocking. I know from my conversations with the other members of the alliance that the social media companies' role has actually been a little bit more predictable and less shocking. They've been extended an invitation. I don't know if any of them are in the room with us today, but they will have heard from colleagues that we have found them, as usual, to be woefully unprepared, I'm sorry to say, and that their measures have been insufficient at the time of this conflict. We have sent them a letter today that my colleague Wendy is going to touch on, which highlights some of the issues that are going to be raised in today's event, as well as the demands that we have made to address them. And the stories that I've heard from the speakers joining us today make me very angry. They illustrate companies' disregard for non-English languages, the unserious ways in which they have dealt with genocidal contexts, especially ones that have not been in the news, and the careless ways in which they have dealt with the safety of human rights defenders. The people undertaking the brave and tireless work of dismantling racist structures of oppression, waging the struggle to uphold the promise of never again, and healing their communities in the aftermath of genocide are at the same time, while doing this difficult work, forced to contend with social media companies that are unaccountable to us, the people, and yet have immense power and control over our speech. So I'm deeply honored today to introduce our speakers. Some of them have traveled for stable Wi-Fi, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. Thank you so much. We'll be hearing today from Wendy from the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism, Rafal from the Never Again Association, Saidullah from the Rohingya Student Network, Lucky, a Rohingya women's rights activist and student, Haidar Hamzouz from the Iraqi Network for Social Media, and Thin Mori from Equality Labs, who is right now at an event and will be joining us shortly. So their experience and expertise really highlights the David and Goliath nature of the struggle that we're waging against major social media companies like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. And this is precisely why we have formed the Global Alliance Against Digital Hate and Extremism. It's because we want to pool our collective power to take on these challenges. We want to make sure that different stakeholders are represented in this struggle for corporate accountability, especially those that are from communities directly affected. So we'll be talking more about the Alliance, but I do encourage folks who work with civil society organizations or with collectives, if you haven't signed up yet to be a part of the network, please do. My colleague Ruth is going to circulate a Google form link. So this network is already a 70-strong group of organizations, and this is where you'll be able to join future campaigns and actions, amplify stories, have your own campaigns amplified, but also take part in community calls, which we'll be using to organize our future tactics. And yeah, just want to say thank you so much once again for joining, and I'll pass it on to Wendy to kick us off.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here today, and particularly the members of the more than 70 supporting organizations in this alliance. As Bisan said, all of our organizations have been working for years to get the tech and social media companies to treat their users fairly and justly and create safe space without disinformation, hate speech, or threats of violence. All of us have come together recognizing that we're facing a global threat to democracies and incitement to violence, even genocide, originating and spreading online with the companies refusing to properly address the problems and even facilitate it in some cases. And the companies prefer to divide advocates by issue area, region, and language, even though the issues are global. That might make sense if the disparities between English and non-English content weren't so glaring when it comes to actual action. The majority of users are non-English speakers and represent all regions of the world, with the Global South being the most neglected. At this point, we can only see a persistent indifference from the companies and a devotion to a profit motive which trumps all others. Today, we sent the companies a letter from our alliance laying out our demands. We want no special treatment for the politically powerful and enforcement of the community standards and content policies equally. We want clear definitions of dangerous organizations and individuals and how the policies are enforced, not only in the US and Europe, but in the Global South. And we want a devotion of proportionate resources to cultural competency and content moderation in all languages. These are not abstract discussions or technical talk about algorithms. The consequences of not making these changes are chilling and life-threatening, as you'll hear from our speakers today. The harms to democracy, disinformation, and incitements to violence generated by politicians and influencers around the world are clear to see. It's not just Trump, who may be the most obvious, but others in the US who seek to rile up their bases with harmful rhetoric that leads to hate crimes and insurrection. And then there's Modi in India, where the anti-Muslim hate speech is rampant, and Bolsonaro in Brazil with his anti-LGBTQ and anti-indigenous people comments. And AFD in Germany, which spouts a white nationalist narrative, is actually under government security watch. And the Polish president and prime minister that viciously spread anti-LGBTQ hate and anti-Semitism. Facebook's own oversight board has made the recommendation to treat all users the same, but to little avail. And last year, Twitter conducted a global survey of how leaders should be treated, but has yet to release the results or change its policy. It's unclear what YouTube's policy is, but judging by the vile content so often on its platform, it's clear they are not doing enough to get rid of hate speech and disinformation. And these are just a handful of the global politicians that have the potential to harm literally every person on the planet. Today, you will hear from speakers from Iraq and Myanmar, as well as more on Poland and India. All of the companies say that their policies are global and that they're enforced globally. But the reality is that they were created from the US point of view and experience, and then they're haphazardly applied from that point of view around the world. To date, the companies have been happy to rely on government lists of dangerous and terrorist organizations, which are disproportionately focused on Islamist extremism, even though many governments agree that the primary threat comes from white supremacist extremism. And as shown by the leaked Facebook documents, the companies can't even get it right in the US, where white supremacist groups are freely use the internet to spread their hate, organize, and fundraise. And YouTube still allows dozens of Generation Identity channels, a transnational white supremacist network that has been linked to the Christchurch murders and banned by multiple governments, to thrive. There are thousands of examples of how dangerous content is allowed to thrive in non-English languages with virtually no moderation. You'll hear more from our speakers, but Global Project Against Hate and Extremism just completed a study comparing conversion therapy material in English to that of Swahili. The results were stark, with the Swahili content being vile, not to mention false. All of the companies have been notified of this disparity, and some changes were made around conversion therapy, but only for the English content, not the Swahili. Civil society does not need more trainings on how to report violations or to hear how tough this is on the companies. The tech companies know the problems, they know how to fix them, and they have the resources to fix them. And it's time to stop relying on civil society to do the work for them. It's time for them to take up the responsibility of being the richest companies on earth and protect the democratic systems that have allowed them to dominate the planet. And with our new alliance, with representatives from every continent except Antarctica, we're going to hold them accountable to do just that. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Wendy. It's quite a bleak overview with the many examples that you gave, but at the same time, I think your call to action for the Alliance is accurate and moving. Rafal, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you very much, Bisan. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I want to say that I'm really happy that the Global Alliance is starting today. I think it really has a very important role. I want to mention the Never Again Association has monitored hate speech and hate crime since 1996. And we have always known that hate speech eventually leads to violence. But never before did we realize it in such a dramatic way as today, in the context of this brutal, cruel war that is happening just next door, just in a neighboring country. And what you said, Bisan, in the very beginning, I completely agree with. A very important aspect of this current context is the propaganda that has served to promote, to legitimize this very tragic act of aggression, and a lot of that is happening online. And I think many of us heard from the main social media platforms, you know, the claims they made about removing the pro-war propaganda from their platforms, which they partly did, but only partly. And they removed some outlets, some notorious propaganda outlets, but there are many other pro-war outlets that are still there, and they are not removed at all. And for me, the most symbolic and the most spectacular case is the case of Alexander Dugin, who is the main ideologue of neo-fascism in Russia, who is very popular with far-right and white supremacist groups in many countries. And the last time I checked, his fan page on Facebook still is live. And I think the sort of rampant propaganda and justification of those mass killings that we have seen in those last weeks, that is really a test which those big companies have failed. And in the Polish context, there is something else. As we know, this is the biggest refugee crisis that our country has ever faced, and one of the biggest refugee crises in recent history, with millions of people fleeing the war zone, and most of them fled to Poland. That's almost 3 million people. And they are, I have to say, there is a real feeling of solidarity and sympathy for those refugees in Poland. But there are also some far-right groups that actively try to to promote hostility against the refugees. That includes both the Ukrainian refugees, Ukrainian nationals, as well as the non-white refugees from Ukraine. In the first days of the war, so in the last days of February, those groups already started promoting disinformation and hate speech against refugees, and they circulated false stories of alleged crimes and rapes committed by the refugees in the area near the Polish-Ukrainian border, which never happened, which was completely fictional. And those stories, those claims appeared on social media, especially on the day, the 28th of February. And that day and the next day, it directly led to violent attacks against refugees. Luckily, nobody was killed, but these were serious physical attacks against people that resulted directly from online hate speech and disinformation, and those lies online directly led to the physical attacks. Well, we saw it coming, and we reported a lot of those cases to the main social media platforms. And in most of those cases, the social media platforms didn't react, or they reacted by telling us they were not going to remove those lies. That concerns all the main platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube in particular. Our organization has the status of so-called trusted flagger with each of those platforms. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of trust in the relationship, I'm sorry to say, and I think, well, this is just one example of the kind of harms that result from the responsible attitude on the part of the platforms. But I think it is one of the most spectacular examples in this very tragic current context. So obviously, there's a lot of work to be done in this field, and we very much look forward to our cooperation in frames of the Global Alliance, and I very much hope that soon we can together achieve an improvement, and we can make the online reality, the online space, a better place for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rafal. I think, you know, as people who kind of work in this space, this need to build the case that the link between online violence and online hate speech and offline violence it's not that tenuous anymore. And I think you touched on that very well. And I think our next speaker, Saeedullah from Myanmar, is likely going to have reflections on this as well. So thank you so much. And Saeedullah, I'll pass it on to you now.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. And I also thanks to the organizer of this global moment for having me here today. Actually, I'm a Rohingya from Myanmar, but now here in the world's largest refugee camps in Bangladesh. Actually, the Rohingya peoples, we say Rohingya refugees. Rohingya refugees are not like other refugee groups. We are refugee, also we are the genocide survivors. So if we see how we survived the genocide, how we became like this here in refugee life, then we see like the Facebook is also responsible for that. A social media platform, the Facebook is responsible for that, because, you know, it is a historical record that Rohingya people have been living in Myanmar since for decades, and Rohingya people live there, you know, peacefully together with all other ethnic minority groups, other ethnic groups. Like we do have better communications, and we do have a good relationship among each community. We lived peacefully together. But when the country's policy changed against the Rohingya, at that time the extremist politicians who are, who really don't when the Rohingya live there in Myanmar, started spreading hate speeches on Facebooks. Like they say, these people, they call Rohingya as Bengali. So they say these Bengali people are not a part of this country. So let the public get in hand with military so that these people will be finished from the country. And I saw lots of like this content, hate speeches on Facebook against Rohingya. Like they also say, if the country remains something like this, then we can see our president will be with beard. That means they are saying like, if the countries remain something like that, then they are saying the president of the country will be a Rohingya, will be a Muslim. So they spreaded lots of hate speeches, different hate speeches. The nationalist Buddhist and the monks and the politicians, especially when we see from the government side, at that time we see the Aung San Suu Kyi, she also spreaded hate speeches against Rohingya. When we see to the military side, at that time we will see to the General Mi Online, he also spread a lot of hate speeches. And also if we see to the public Buddhists, at that time there are lots of Buddhist monk. We know them like Wiratu, Buddhist politicians, and also there are lots of people like him who mainly spreaded the hate speeches. So as I mentioned, we were good with each other. We live peacefully together, but their hate speeches on the social media platform, on the Facebook, changed the mind of the people. Like it seems something like the harms of online is, affecting to our offline life. When they started spreading hate speeches, after just some time, step by step, the communications with the behavior of our friends who were from other ethnic groups become changed with us. They started hating us even in our offline life. Finally, we had left the country. We survived lots of challenges, lots of difficulties, lots of violations in Myanmar. It's also just because of the Facebook, because we had a good position there in Myanmar, but the Facebook helped to the people who really don't want us to stay peacefully there. So after arriving here in Bangladesh, we do not have anything, we do not have any power, we do not have a capacity to fight against Facebook, because in front of the Facebook we are like something like just some ant. The Facebook is a big elephant, but we the people are just ant in front of the Facebook. So we are not able to go what we want to do with the Facebook. But we didn't stay silent, because we understand what the Facebook did with us. The Facebook make our life. So we very politely asked the Facebook some help for the Rohingya peoples, and we did it in I think 19 June 2020. We sent a letter to the Facebook asking some help for the Rohingya people. But in 20 August, we had a meeting with the Facebook human rights director, Miranda. And after that, we sent a second letter to the Facebook, but they rejected our proposal. In the second letter, we asked some specific help from the Facebook. Our specific help was like creating education opportunity for the Rohingya living in the camps, because we already lost our life. The Facebook make our life lost. So they destroyed our life. So we asked the Facebook to pay some help to us so that we can rebuild our life. But the Facebook very diplomatically rejected our proposal. So we thought like we should better go to a way which is possible for us to get the Facebook engaged with Rohingya people. Then we decided to carry a case for the Facebook, like against Facebook under the OECD guidelines. So now we are going through that process. But for that process, we need your help. We need the help of, we need the support of international community, because the Facebook is really a big organization. They will really not hear to us like this way. So I'm just expecting your help. I'm just, asking, I'm just requesting your help and the help of all the people around the world, because we suffered by the Facebook. And so far, I think we suffered these violations from the Facebook, and maybe all the people in the world also maybe suffer this violence, same violence, because the threat the Facebook having to us is like a coronavirus, you know. So no one can remain safe until everyone is safe. So these problems, these violations of the Facebook can quickly spread to everyone's life, to every people's in this world. So now it is time to stand together hand in hand to make a quick solution, to bring out a quick solutions for the people, for Rohingya peoples, for the people who suffered by the Facebook. So that's all from my side. I really hope that the peoples today here and all other people who will be listening this program will really come forward to help us, to support us, to disappear this violence providing by the Facebook to all the peoples, to the Rohingya people. So no, that's all from my side. Thank you, everyone. No, I would be looking forward for the question and answer session, so that if anyone have any questions for me, I would love to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Saidullah. And I see Wendy, they're clapping for your intervention. I mean, you have my solidarity. I'm sure I can speak on behalf of the Alliance that that we have your back. I'm sorry that it has felt like it was a struggle waged between ants and elephants. And I think it is our duty and the duty of everyone listening here today to make sure that we grow in power to be able to kind of get that corporate accountability, because it's very clear from what you're saying that you hold them responsible for the crimes that have been perpetrated against you and your people. And Lucky, I'm going to pass it on to you now if there's anything that you'd like to share with us.
Hello everyone, do you hear me? Am I audible?
We can hear you great.
Okay. So good morning and good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you are at the moment. So I will just keep my camera off. Today, where I am in the background is not really okay. So my name is Lucky from the Rohingya community, and I'm studying at an international university. I have been working for quite a long time, supporting the Rohingya community and for their women's rights to go to school in Cox's Bazar camp. So today I'm here to support the people who complain and raise their voices to the wall about Facebook and what they have experienced. So Rohingya have been facing crimes against humanity since the 17th century. They have been facing not only through offline but also through online. Rohingya doesn't mean to always suffer. As we know, they suffer genocide from our government, and likewise Facebook has also changed the Rohingya's life into a harmful situation. It has lost the human rights of Rohingya young people, and it becomes less of a priority than before. Facebook seems to reject the voice of the Rohingya. Facebook is a great platform that is being used by the people around the globe for different purposes. When Facebook was spreading harmful things about the Rohingya community, by that time, all the Facebook users hated the Rohingya community because they believed Facebook most, and seems like Facebook prioritized them a lot, and whatever they are uploading on there, this becomes a reality for people, and it affects the dignity of Rohingya community. They do it for their own profit, but Facebook should not lose and ruin a community's dignity. I'm confident that Facebook encouraged the harm to move from online to offline, and now we can see those points are in the action in the real life. We requested Facebook several times for the change, but they did not try to make any change yet. Now the life of Rohingya people is in danger. Rohingya people have been suffering the impacts of discrimination, racial hatred, and state violence for many diseases, enduring both physical and mental abuse. So before I go back to the Myanmar, I will first thankful to the Myanmar government and the government of Bangladesh for the support and for the amazing work that they have done for the Rohingya community in the Cox's Bazar camp. So there was a lot of speech actually and the letter that was uploaded on Facebook by the Myanmar government and the political leaders in Rakhine State. And that Facebook helped them allowed to spread it to in all over the world, and that people can watch it and read it whatever they upload in and writing about the Rohingya community. So there was not a single chance for the Rohingya community to share their feelings and to express what they experience in their life or what they think about the Facebook, and they had no chance. So it was the first priority of the Myanmar people, those who were involved in the Facebook's life. So since we were born in Myanmar, we had a very good relationship with the government and with the political people among us, with the other ethnic majority group and the people and students, whoever were engaged with us and the community. But since they started posting something against Rohingya community in the Facebook and they get support from them, and it helped them to spread it out all over the world. So it becomes a problems for us, and that helps us actually to be separated from one another. So this is how refugee people are suffering the problems in the camp, and there's no chance actually for them that they can share their problems and that they can write whatever they want and the spirit that they're having in their inner life. So the people in the Cox's Bazar camp live like a living dead when it becomes impossible to survive these conditions. Some people have shortaways of acid. The refugee camps where many people are now in Bangladesh feel like a prison. The camps are too crowded and noisy. People cannot breathe well. There are only a few places where people can go, but of course not allowed together, and they even feel like lack of oxygen and fresh air. People are becoming irritable or even experiencing mental breakdowns. Many people are facing cancer, infections such as the virus, diabetes, blood pressure, a lot of diseases that is, putting them down and cannot properly treat. It's very difficult for them actually to suffer all these problems. So finally, I request Facebook, please ensure the protection of Rohingya people, and the most important thing is their dignity. While they are in the refugee camp without citizenship, if they have that, they can live in any broken shelter and survive on bread or water anywhere. Facebook can ruin a person's dignity, and language can make a person valuable. So my humble request to the international community and the people who are hearing and listening to me today to support the Rohingya community in the Cox's Bazar camp and to speak and to raise their voices and to get things that is left in their life. So thank you very much to all of you who are joining us today, and I would be happy to answer to your questions. Feel free to write down in the chat box or raise your hand to ask me.
Thank you so much for that, Lucky. And my big takeaway from that is just how Facebook's profits has translated into a loss of dignity for the Rohingya people. And you do have our solidarity. So I see that questions are coming through. Please do feel free to send them over. We've got a couple of speakers, and then we're happy to open it up for a Q&A. So Hamzouz, if you can tell us a little bit more about the Iraqi context, we'd be so grateful for your contribution.
Thank you so much, Bizan. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's a little bit
That's
far
good.
away. This is better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bizan, and for the rest of the global team who has given us this opportunity to raise the local voices like Iraq. So I quote here from the website, and the goals and we believes in our movements: fairness, justice, safety, and transparency. That's what we are looking from the social media companies, at least. So the context of Iraq, I saw my colleagues, the speakers, brought too many examples about Facebook, but we have also too many examples about other social companies. It's not heaven there, especially Twitter or Telegram. So I will put some examples here about what's happening in the Iraqi context. We are not facing only a hate speech online, and to have a better understanding, I'm sharing in the chat a lexicon we did back in 2020 about the hate speech terms on social media in Iraq. This can give you some introduction about what's happening. But the problem here, that the online hate speech, it's moving offline, means we are losing people's life. I will give you an example. Too many reports we send about hate speech against a women activist, strong voice from Basra, from south of Iraq. Her name, Dr. Reham Yaqub. Several times we reported about misleading information and fake information about her activism, and they linked her activities to, U.S. Embassy in Basra and things like that. That's back in 2018, and this campaign led by one of the TV stations that belongs to one of the Iranian government's backed militia. That's in 2018. Imagine in 2020 and during the Iraqi protest, and when she led a women protest in Basra, they killed her. So imagine if we have action in 2018, we can save her life. So Iraqis losing their lives because of this ignorance, from the social media companies towards our region, and specifically in Iraq. The same thing happened with the political analyst Hisham al-Hashimi. Also, till today, the user who threatened Hisham to kill him at his door is still active on Twitter. And the TV station that I mentioned, it's got verified on Twitter. So imagine what's happening here. So back to the story of Hisham al-Hashimi, and he's very strong political analyst, a good friend, also has been killed because of his threats on Twitter at his door in July 2020. So and we are still losing. This is just two examples from too many examples I can bring. The list goes on. Just in 2019 to 2020, we lost around 700 person who protest, young people, even some of them kids under 18. We lost them because they raised their voice on internet. So we are facing an organized hate speech. It's not random, it's organized, led by some government agencies, some of Iranian government's backed militia here. And the problem, beside the double standard that we see inside the social media companies, that they focus on a country and they ignore other countries, and it depends about the founders' moods, where they want to go. When we have a community standard or a list of dangerous organizations, we don't see these organizations with a Twitter. So that means it's not about US law, it's about founders' mood law. Here we are talking about. So this, all these lists, it's prepared without any consultation, without any conversation with a civil society organization, specialist in that to talk about. Even there is no transparency. As I mentioned, transparency, it's one of the keys here, important, to be honest. People, sometimes they violate the community standard and they don't know why they are violated. There is no any clear reason here. And then we discover just they put a new person in the list, and the list it's secret until it's leaked. Then we discover this person is not allowed to be on Facebook, but it's allowed to be on Instagram. Imagine, and they are same company. So the double standard here, and the situation is very bad. Let me see. So what we are talking about here, that it's very important to have more engagement from social media companies with the civil society, especially Telegram. Telegram now, it becomes one of the big problems. People, militias hiding behind channels and spreading hate speech, spreading misinformation and fake news around activists, around NGOs, and these people, they want to survive because they have examples, people lost their life, to withdraw their activity, work below the radar. Yes, the situation is very bad. That's why this alliance and all people here who's attending the meetings, I welcome them like to join and support, because this is not about any issue in the one country. This is an issue of all. It's a global issue, and we need to support and stand back with each other. I'm really sad when I hear the story of Sayyid Allah, when he said that social media companies treat us like we are ants, or we are small. But imagine ants will be very strong when they come together. They can push a big rock, comparing with their sizes. So it's very important to stand to each other, and our voice, the local voice in Iraq, will be empowered because of that global alliance. I can share more examples, but because of the limited time I have, and I want to let other speakers also to talk, and also want to hear your questions. Thank you so much again, Bisan.
Thank you so much, Hamzouz. I mean, I've heard you talk about Dr. Riham Yaoub and Hisham al-Hashimi before, and every time it's absolutely heartbreaking and enraging. But I think you did something important, which is, tied these terrible stories to the policies, which is that, we're at the whim of the founders' moods. There's a lack of transparency. We don't know what's happening. And in the cases of companies that are overlooked, like Telegram, there's no engagement with civil society whatsoever. And, I think we'll be talking about our demands a little bit more, because those are some of the questions that are coming in. But I think broadly that kind of helps us get started.
Sorry, and just last line I want. It's very sad when I go to my Facebook and I see at least 5-6 friends that I already know becomes remembering on Facebook. That's the only action we have, we see from Facebook. They convert their profile into remembering, and I see the old messages between me and them. So we don't want that, we need them alive.
Absolutely, absolutely. Especially in moments of crisis, that's that's when it's so much more amplified. Then Maury, I'm going to pass it on to you now.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. And for all who are tuning in, we appreciate you spending time with us during this launch. I just want everyone to take a big breath, because I know that we've heard a lot of powerful testimony, and all of my fellow speakers are carrying with us the wounds of war and genocide and mass atrocity, much of which are not being addressed by the companies who have helped to be complicit with these crimes. But also that many of our impacts of carrying this violence has tragic consequences on our communities, from the somatic violence that, Lucky, our colleague, spoke about, to the grief that Haider just shared about seeing people you care about turned into condolence pages as opposed to being with us alive, fighting for dignity and our rights. So if you can just take a breath so that we could acknowledge the tremendous amount of violence we just witnessed and heard from, I think it's important that we look to some of the ways that we might be able to transform. And I think that there's a lot to be learned in terms of the lessons of the Indian market, because currently the Indian market is the largest market for all of the social media companies that is in open genocide. And what we see is that in the failure of the companies to actually do anything substantial about it, is that it is a failure at many levels. One, we have compromised local offices, where the local offices are often working directly with genocidal actors and are not transparent about their lifting up and making money off of influential, dangerous speech actors. But also that none of these companies have clear, transparent policies for what it means to operate in a genocide. For example, with a company like Facebook, Facebook had its first mass atrocity on its platform in South Asia in 2013 with the Musafnagar riots, and they never did a human rights assessment after that. In fact, they were only pushed to do a human rights impact audit assessment by civil society groups, in 2018, 2019. And even though it's completed, they refuse to release it. And I suspect that they are refusing to release it because of how damning those findings are. But I think also the biggest challenge that we see is that when a market goes into genocide, like what we're seeing in India, all of the questions of what civil society's options are go out the window, because typically civil society is designed to raise individual posts, raise individual cases related to individual actors. But we have to go upstream, because, like, it's not just about, the 200th or, the 1,000th post we've seen about hate speech. The reality is that the platform is directly partnering with dangerous actors to give them and make money from them off the speech that they make that targets Muslims and caste oppressed and other minorities across all of the platforms. And this is not just about Facebook, it's about Google, it's about Twitter, it's about all of the companies. And we need a comprehensive strategy to address this, because again, they play a shell game, to activists and civil society orgs in the global north. They might, say, okay, well, finally, don't you know, we've actually brought white supremacists on board, finally, after years of advocacy. But even then, if you talk to Wendy, you can know it's not been properly implemented anyway. But with the global majority, for folks of us that are here, whether we're coming from the African continent or the South Asian subcontinent, or Latin America or the MENA region, we know that our dangerous groups are not on those lists. If they were, we would see an enormous shift around what's happening. And we know that in reporting from The Intercept, despite there being, thousands of groups on that dangerous groups list, the majority of those groups are groups that they have designated as being Muslim terrorist organizations. There is not one single Hindu extremist or extremist entity outside of Muslim designated organizations in South Asia, which is a criminal prospect when you think about the fact that we are seeing one of the largest genocides unfold in the Indian context under Hindu nationalist politicians. So we have some very, very urgent conversations I think we need to have as civil society. One, we can no longer accept the human rights box that they want to keep us in, where we are just triaging the bodies of our people. Certainly we can help to identify research that, unveils coordinated and authentic behavior, or that helps us, verify a needed journalist. But all of those things do nothing if they are platforming active Nazis and other hate speech actors by not removing them because of dangerous groups. And in the context of my Rohingyan colleagues that spoke, there isn't even inconsistency in terms of what they've committed to Rohingya people after failing their duty of care to our Rohingya brothers and sisters. For example, all of the companies have said that they will no longer allow Rohingya level hate speech, things that say disgusting things like Rohingya are termites, or they should be extinguished, things that are obviously baseline should not be allowed, as well as Ashwin Varathu, the Buddhist monk who was, responsible for being one of the calls for violence. Each of the companies has said that they will not allow that neither that hate actor or that hate speech to continue. If that is the case, then why in the Indian market, the largest market for all of these companies, do we routinely still see Rohingya themed hate speech in every level of Indian language? Not only that, you have people who are calling themselves the Indian Varathu. Basically, they want to be the Indian version of that Buddhist monk that called for the extermination of Muslims, having millions of followers, thousands of pages, despite civil society raising it. And when we have raised it, they will say, oh, yes, our AI didn't quite catch it. I don't think this has anything to do with AI. It has to do with the fact that these companies are compromised at the core, and their regional implementation with our communities is partially based on the fact that they make money off of this dangerous speech. And so in order for us to prevent an even larger Muslim and caste oppressed genocide in the Indian market, which would impact not 500,000 people, not 2 million people, but hundreds of millions of people we have a moral duty and a political call to action to hold these companies responsible for their criminal negligence and their failure of duty of care towards millions of users who use their platform. And to show like how negligent these companies are, we know that through reporting in the Wall Street Journal that companies like Facebook have already admitted that they have allowed, political users, like a politician from the state of Andhra Pradesh in India, who said, if I see a Rohingya, I will shoot them dead, because they did not want to offend the political sentiments of that political actor. There's also a pre-existing policy that says hate speech from politicians will also not be removed. So if you have direct politicians asking for calls for, genocide, are we hearing from companies that they are going to allow it? And again, we are in the middle of so many contexts that are in crisis, that this is not just about India. This is about a referendum on global democracy. And what are we willing to do in order to protect our communities and our human rights? Because we cannot trust these companies to do the right thing. There has never been in the history of, in American history, an American corporation that has turned the course in terms of their major human rights violation just from their sheer goodwill. They have always been turned by mass movement and by political advocacy. And this is really the call for this alliance today. With a market as large as India at the precipice of genocide, with the fact that this company is refusing to moderate people that are calling for the direct murder of hundreds of millions of Muslims and allowing that content to be there, even allowing pogroms to continue on the platform without proper intervention, we have to act. And that's part of the goal of this coalition. Our hope here is that we can work together to have strategic interventions. We know that there are actually many coalitions that focus on moderation overall, and our focus is really on looking at the ways that we can address the dangerous individuals and organizations' policies, making sure that political actors are not exempt, and showing how when political actors are exempt, it has dangerous consequences, not just in terms of physical violence, but also in terms of the challenges that we face in terms of democracy overall in that market. And so we want to make sure that we can change and make sure that there's direct input from civil society, not just from US and Europe, but from Global South, so that we can expand past this framework around Muslim extremists and be able to have a more multidimensional understanding of who causes harm on this platform. We also want to make sure that there is proportional language and cultural competency, for all markets, and also end the exemptions to content moderation for politically powerful influencers, as well as implement fact-checking for political ads. And we know, companies like Facebook have really detrimental programs like Crosscheck, which in some markets actually allow dangerous, hate speech actors to allow their hate speech to continue, because they are considered the VIP elite of those markets versus the hundreds of millions of people that are the victims of the dangerous speech that is enabled on those platforms. We also are concerned about the algorithmic discrimination and want to address the amplification of disinformation, hate, and extremism that happens through coordinated inauthentic behavior that is enabled by the platform, as well as to have full transparency from the tech companies on their policies, systems, and practices related to disinformation, hate, and extremism globally. Now, this can feel like a very heavy plate of activity, especially given that each of these companies probably has the budget of a small nation state. But I also think that we have a moral call to action. When one of our members on this call is calling from a refugee camp because of being displaced from violence, when one of the members of this panel is supporting people who are fleeing their country because of war, in Ukraine, when one of our speakers here is also sharing about how many of their colleagues have died, because of being targeted by state actors. And when I'm here giving direct testimony to you that we have hundreds of millions of lives at risk in the largest market for Facebook, Twitter, and Google, and nobody is doing anything about it, then we have a moral call to action. We have to be the ants around the elephant's knees and topple that beast, by any means necessary. But the means that we have within us is the power of research, of political advocacy, and no compromise in terms of our asks at this point, because we have let these companies continue to run civil society ragged around the issue of dangerous groups and individuals, and we cannot afford that longer. It's not just our individual lives that are at risk, it is our very democracies. And that's why we hope to have a very welcoming and urgent space where we'll be able to talk about these issues openly and be able to hold these companies' feet to the fire. Because it is not our interest to go into backdoor conversations where we're all polite over, very expensive pastries and coffees while we discuss the genocides of our people. Our job is to ensure a real duty of care to our communities, not some sort of, theater of care. We actually need practical measures to stop this violence right now, because any life that is lost, we too also share complicity with that conversation, particularly if you are someone who lives in a country where these companies have been incorporated. Because again, companies like Facebook and Twitter, they are American companies, unleashing their colonial, technology projects on the global majority without any accountability. So whether it's about regulation, whether it's about, transparency of policies, the time to act is now. And, I really just, speak now, not just on behalf of myself and my organization, but on hundreds of millions of people in the Indian market that do not have the same access and power and even English to be able to share the tremendous risk that is at the table right now. But I can tell you, at every moment of history where we have faced darkness, there has always been people who hold up the light. Because the opposite of genocide is to choose life. And I encourage everyone on this call to choose life with us, to fight with us, and to join our alliance as we take this path forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maury. And I feel like I'm in the presence of that life and hope and heroism. Thank you so much. I mean, I think there's been a few themes today. I think it's clear that this is a crisis. So in some areas it has been covered by the media, in some areas it has not. But we are at a global point of crisis. Saidullah said earlier that no one is safe until we're all safe, and Hamzouz said the same thing. And we're talking about how we're going to build power to take on criminal negligence. So I want to thank you all so much. We don't have a lot of time for questions. I think in terms of the, how we link these stories and to what we're actually calling for, I think Maury covered that beautifully. And there was a slide up for folks to see that, but that's also it's also on the website. And if you join the network, that's where the kind of campaign ideas will be flowing so that we can organize together to work toward those goals. But what I'm going to do is combine a few questions and put them to all of you, to our panelists, and then ask you to, answer the question, but also do your kind of 2-minute roundup so that we can finish at a 1:15. And the question that I'd like to ask is around roles and responsibilities, which have come from a few of the attendees today. So, what is the role of tech workers in all of this? What is the role of advertisers in all of this? What is the role of international organizations like the UN? So, when we're taking on this struggle of influencing the companies, there are different stakeholders. What are the roles of these different stakeholders? And if it's okay, Wendy, I'm going to put you on the spot and kick off with you. And if you can offer your closing remarks as well, and then we'll go around the room.
Okay, sure. And I welcome input from the other panelists. The role of tech company employees. Well, we've all seen some really good work out of the tech companies when they stand up to the leadership of those companies and either have walkouts or they write letters. In some cases, they have taken leaked documents with them. I'm not advocating for that, but they're holding your employer accountable for the work or the damage that they cause is important, and it's powerful. It makes a difference because that gets to a bottom line. A company's ability to operate or not operate on a daily basis gets to a bottom line that maybe an advertising boycott does not, right? We saw, I mean, there was a big boycott last year, and it made a powerful statement in bringing attention to the fact that all of the major companies globally use the social media companies as one of their primary advertising outlets, and they all agreed to stop. So it made the statement in a really perfect global way. Unfortunately, they're not the primary they're not the primary revenue drivers. It's the small companies. It's the people who absolutely cannot live without social media. They cannot operate their businesses. And so we can't ask those folks to boycott because it would mean their small businesses shutting down. So I think, though, that the advertisers could make more of a statement by consistently holding the companies to account. Excuse me. For example, on YouTube, every single day we see content that was it's either hate speech, it's disinformation. It was already supposed to have been banned. Some of the content is banned by various countries. Every single day we see that content monetized. And the companies who end up on those videos can have a greater impact because that impacts like the whole sales advertising algorithm on YouTube. So that was one thing. And I'm sorry, I forgot, what was that last part?
So it was tech workers, advertisers, and international organizations like the UN, for example.
Well, I think there is so little ability for organizations like the UN to hold these companies accountable. In the US, we know that there are severe challenges to holding the companies accountable. Even the regulations, the laws that are passing through Europe and the EU, through the EU right now, while they're going to be a big improvement, but there's a lot of gaps in that legislation. I think that the public pressure is really what they can do. A relentless campaign of you are doing bad things. You are killing people. You are creating a situation where lives are at stake, and of course we get into the democracies. Democracies are quite literally at stake around the globe, here in the US, many other countries. And so it's the constant public pressure that will make a difference, because they don't like to be embarrassed. I can say that. These companies do not like to be embarrassed, but they're willing to take it. At some point, it just doesn't matter anymore. But I do think that makes a difference, the public pressure. One thing I want to say about the getting rid of the exemptions for the political speakers, I think it's one of the most important things that can be done. We have actually, all of us who have been working for years, all of us who read the news, who read the US news, or read the European news or the global news, global South, have seen the direct impact of the lack of moderation, the lack of care and that the companies have given to the health of our democracies. Like right now, every day or every few days, Facebook is putting out, and I say Facebook, it's not just Facebook, it's Twitter, it's YouTube, it's all of them. But they're putting out statements, what we're doing ahead of the Filipino elections, what we're doing ahead of the Myanmar elections, what we're doing ahead of the US elections. Well, they shouldn't be, sort of ramping up in the weeks prior to an election. This is an everyday, all year long process that leads us to a situation where we have illiberal candidates getting on the ballots and possibly winning. It's infuriating. I'm sorry, I don't want to get too emotional, but it is infuriating to see this when they absolutely know what should and what can and should be done. So that was just my closing on the political speakers.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I'm just going to pass it on to you, Rafal, now for a couple of minutes, if you can, of closing remarks, as well as the roles that can be played here.
Thank you very much. I will be very brief, also because I agree with everything that has been said. But I think each of those topics you mentioned, Bisan, deserves a separate discussion, which I think we could and should organize as a global alliance. One discussion about the role of the big tech employees, one about advertisers, and one about international organizations such as United Nations. I think these are actually very important subjects for us to tackle collectively. But I think what unites each of those elements in this puzzle is the very basic fact that we are all human beings, and this is not just a discussion about algorithms and technical solutions, but at the end of the day there is a human being who takes a decision. And I think this is also an opportunity, so to say. We can appeal to the human beings who are eventually responsible for the policies and the decisions, and also the ways the algorithms are fixed. So I think if there is some hope at the end of the tunnel, I think the hope is in the fact that we share humanity with people who may be on the wrong side of history just now, but we can bring them to the good side of history soon, hopefully. Thank you.
I sincerely hope so. And point noted on the conversations that we can organize, just noticing that there are a lot of questions that we won't be able to answer today, but it looks like there is appetite for continued discussion, which makes me very happy. Saidullah, can you give us your closing remarks?
Hi, yes, thank you very much. Yeah, actually, I do not have nothing special, but what I only want to say is just help from the people, because, as already all of our brothers and sisters mentioned, I think almost everything is covered. So if we see we can organize like this alliance, like these meetings every day, every time, but what we only need to do specifically, like to be an effective step, that is having a strategy to go for an action, like to go for an step, like what we must do, like what we will do, what we all need to do. So I just would like to suggest that idea to all of the participants and the organizers, just to make another step to go forward related to this case, related to these issues, because it is really a very old situations happening in this world. So thank you so much. That's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Saidullah. And I think all of us feel that duty now to build on this and make sure that something that our next step comes very soon. Lucky, would you like to offer your closing remarks?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much to all of you, especially to the organizer who organized the event today to address the important points of the refugee in Cox's Bazar camp. And I hope we have already covered all the important points that have been suffering in the refugee camp people, in the largest refugee camp. And I would just like to request those who are listening to us today, as my friend Saidullah mentioned, that if we like to organize the meeting, if we like to, organize the event, to ask questions and to answer to the people, it cannot be covered until we die, until we leave the world, because we have a lot of issues to discuss, we have a lot of problems to be solved, but what we would like to discuss is the specific point, the important point that should be in the action in the real life, that should be in the actions. Having a lot of meetings, having a lot of discussions, is not really acceptable for the refugee communities. So what we have to do is we just have to, pick up the important points and discuss on that and find a sustainable solution for the refugee community in Cox's Bazar, so that will help them to improve and go forward for their rest of their life. So again, thank you so much to the participants and to the organizer for having this event. And we would be happy to have one more event in the future to discuss and to come up with the questions and to answer to the people who have the questions already in our chat box. And my request again to the international community and the humanitarian organization to come to the refugee camp and listen to them and support them in their needs, and also support them to raise their voices to the wall, especially to request the Facebook platform to protect the refugee and to make sure that everyone is safe in the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lucky. Thank you. I'll take that call to action to heart myself. Hamzouz, do you want to offer your closing remarks?
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. Very quick. Beside all the initiative we are doing, and it's great, I think it's very important to pay attention also to have more educated lawyers in technology. It's more to have more educated developers in digital rights. I can see that some of developers joining these companies without care about or without knowing about digital rights. Every time when I meet someone represent the social media companies, when I look to the background, I see a political background, diplomacy background, but I can't see any civil society or human rights background here inside these social media companies. Also, the weakness points for social media companies, it's money. It's all about money. So it's very important to follow the money here. And here what I'm talking about, it's about influencers. If we have more influencers who they can join the force and beat the elephant, as Allah said, it's very important. So yeah, we are the ants who will be the best, the elephants.
Yeah, I think that's the metaphor of the hour. Thank you so much, Hamzouz. And then Maury, I'm going to pass it on to you now for closing remarks.
Sure. I just, again, thank everybody for joining us because, the time of action is really right now. And, the question that you laid to us is actually really important because, part of the way that the social media companies get away with making money off of genocide is by siloing stakeholders. So workers have one pathway, civil society has another pathway, shareholders have another pathway, and intergovernmental organizations have another pathway. I think we break down all those silos. I think we bring everyone to a table of action and we say, this is our plan moving forward. And I think for workers that are listening to this call, it's really important that for you to know that whatever the conditions are, and we know that I worked pretty extensively with caste oppressed workers across all of the tech companies, the kinds of hostile workplaces people are facing, where there is open discrimination and bigotry, actually has an impact in terms of the kinds of content and products that they create. So for example, with Facebook moderation is actually outsourced to Accenture, and we have had employees share with us that they're openly using dangerous speech, the moderators themselves. So if people are using that speech, how on earth can they be entrusted to moderate content to stop a genocide? Again, we cannot have the foxes guarding the hen house here. And that's exactly what's happening with these companies. So my sense is that we need workers to stand up and be active on this issue, to feel comfortable using organizations like Whistleblowers Aid to share what they know and to build relationships with civil society about some of the most urgent markets that are in crisis. But I also think as civil society, we need to be more ambitious. You know, too often we accept the small crumbs while they are actually getting away with all of it. And I just think that what we do is we just pretend, not pretend, but we just act like this is our rights, our countries, our markets, and take it all back. And I say this particularly as someone who's an advocate from the Global South, because I remember when Cambridge Analytica happened, I sat across from several executives in Facebook and had said, you know, you have just guaranteed the United States a civil rights audit. Where are the similar audits and human rights impact audit assessments for all of the countries of the Global South? And they looked at me like I was from Mars, and I guaranteed them I'm from Earth and I'm going to make their lives a living hell until this happens. And this is the reality, is that too often those of us in the global majority do not understand how much power we have, but we are the future of these platforms. We represent the next billions that are coming on to the internet. And the reality is that these companies do not have a future in the global north. They are looking to mine our communities and make money off the genocides and mass atrocities that occur while they align themselves with digital authoritarians. We can say no, we can stop it. And some of that requires us to be able to come to the table to create more transformative visionary policy asks, as opposed to what they're saying that we can work on. We just blow up all their agendas and say, no, here's what we're at that table to discuss, and we're not coming away until we get some action. And I think that's where the hope with this coalition is that we can not only come together to create shared consensus and agendas, but create global movements for accountability. Because I saw one of the questions people asked was, how does disinformation happen with bad actors? And I can tell you, in the Indian context, what we have seen is that in every instance, the company has erred on allowing bad actors who are making genocidal calls for action, has allowed them to come to power. You know, because one question I remember asking the company was, what does it take to get kicked off the platform? Do I have to, you know, because clearly they're allowing murderers. In fact, there was someone that had said that they had confessed to trying to shoot an Indian Muslim student for speaking out about their rights. He basically made his confession on the platform. They didn't take him off. So you can actually be someone who tries to commit a murder and you will still stay on. And because they allowed that person to stay on, he became a politician. And then now that he was a politician, they can't remove him, because remember, politicians don't get taken off even if they're issuing dangerous speech. So this pipeline of how these companies have been complicit with genocidal processes is the exact pipeline that we need to target. And, you know, whether it's the coordinated inauthentic behavior and the disinformation that comes from these actors, to the aftermath, what we don't want is another mea culpa, you know, of these companies saying, we should have known, we're so sorry, oh, a genocide happened, ouch. You know, this is not, we don't need to see Mark's face on another, you know, congressional hearing where he says, like, we did all we could. They absolutely have not done all that they could. But we haven't just got, you know, but we are just getting started. So I just would like to encourage people to know we have still so many paths towards action. You know, if our goal, you know, in a nod to my colleague Rafal, if our goal is to say never again, then we have to seriously act like we mean never again. Because right now the social media companies are all about over and over again, you know? So I think that it's important that we as people of conscience, we as people of moral courage, really say we are going to transform the way that we approach these policies and really start to, you know, hone in on those dangerous groups, because we are on the right side of history. And I guarantee you there's a lot of people inside those companies that do not want to have genocide on their hands. And so we're asking, you know, there to be folks to join us from the inside, from the outside, and then to take our voice forward to intergovernmental organizations. Because it's also clear that at the intergovernmental level, whether at the UN or at bodies like the EU, people are concerned but don't have the parameters within which to make these decisions accurately, because we don't have enough global conversations from the global majority upward. So hopefully this can be one of those spaces that we lift it up. And it's an honor to be here with all of my colleagues here, and looking forward to build justice together.
Thank you so much, then, Maury. Thank you for raising the kind of bar for where our ambitions should be. There's absolutely nothing I can add to that except to say it was an absolute honor. Thank you all so much for joining us today, for the speakers, for those who had to make the journeys to get stable Wi-Fi, and to everyone who stayed with us for nearly an hour and a half. We'll be in touch, and thank you all so much once again for your time. Take care. Thank you.